Good morning, Art.
Good morning, Shane.
Hey, how's RSA, the fourth day, 9 a.m.?
Well, exhausting. It feels like I've been running a marathon. I've been putting 25,000 steps on my Fitbit every day, running around the expo hall. So, I'm tired.
Oh, wow. Well, have you had an opportunity to scare folks with your latest war stories from the pits of ransomware?
Yeah, I'm always about that fear, uncertainty, and doubt. So I'm throwing as much of the war stories in there as I can. But ransomware definitely has been accelerating, and I'm sharing that with everybody I can.
Yeah. All right. Excellent. Yeah. I've been struggling to just keep my voice for 6 hours a day the past 4 days, going through MITRE's frameworks, number of frameworks, and then relationships back out to other, either other frameworks or standards. It's been kind of interesting.
I'm sure that, especially the positioning of your booth on the floor, everyone's walking by you. So I can imagine you'd be losing your voice. But yeah, I've been speaking about resiliency in general, but also CREF a lot. And at B-Sides, I've been doing what I can to kind of share the gospel of CREF and help everybody understand really that resiliency is about adaptation. And to me, that's kind of the core idea behind CREF. There's a lot, obviously, in those mitigations, and there's a lot of work that you guys have put into it and poured into it, and I love sharing that with everybody. But from an incident response point of view, the idea that we're having to be able to adapt constantly to the threat actor, that is something that is not really built into other security programs. Most of them are almost built around a budget, and they're built around, let's put some static thing in place where we can stop the attacker and survive. Well, although survivability is the goal, it is, not a comfortable goal for a lot of organizations. A lot of people that aren't adapting, they're facing the same attacks over and over and over again. And incident response by default is kind of reactive. It is, I'm waiting for someone to attack me. So we've kind of changed how we think about incident response as a result of implementing CREF.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, and thank you so much for the plug for Cyber Resiliency Engineering Framework. Anything that, anytime anyone engages NIST 800 160 Volume 2, my heart grows slightly bigger. But it's an excellent piece of work. It is large, but that's why the CREF Navigator is out there to help others consume it. And of course, there's all our other frameworks that have somewhat defined some of the industry in a sense, with attack, and then defend, which is absolutely awesome, Peter's work. And the thing that I should say is, obviously CREF's not all me. It's a gentleman by the name of Justin Bowie, and we've had even an intern, Teju Vijay, who's done excellent work for us last summer to make that happen. So, I got to say kudos to them, but the work itself is really where all that's come from. And the ever-present, adapting adversary is what it's meant to address. So,
yeah. I think that one of the things that people miss is that there are so many projects coming out of MITRE. And although attack is the one that seems to get everybody in the industry's attention, that Cyber Resiliency Engineering Framework is a solid product, and especially that the CREF Navigator makes it usable. All the engineering documents are great, but it's a lot to digest. And then you look at it and you're like, how do I implement this? And CREF Navigator actually makes it easy to understand how to implement it. And with what you're doing with attack, it actually kind of brings the two together so that people that are in that cybersecurity mindset know what to do and how to implement things. So kudos to your team for doing that.
Yeah, thank you. And I think the other piece, and what's the most challenging with taking 310 pages and trying to dissect it in a way that makes it consumable to others, is just figuring out how to get tables to visualization, and in visualization so that it's something that eventually can get to maybe a boardroom or higher level executives, because oftentimes there's folks that are sitting at the lower levels that are really challenged with, how do I go and communicate this outward? How do I communicate the need, the requirements for resiliency, and the techniques and approaches that I might need to use to make that happen? What products are here, RSA, and other places where that I should really talk to and figure out how to go in and exchange information on a common level. And Cyber Resiliency Engineering Framework is meant to do that. So, but from your perspective and your tool set, since you're dealing in the trenches with the ever-present, ever-adapting adversary, is there anything like new or unique that your organization's doing, or something that you've seen that's just a new adaptation that you've had to adapt to and done something special to kind of add to the sauce, the next step for adversaries?
Right. So what we've been seeing with attacks lately is, ransomware in general, the encryption, once it's actually deployed, that's not changing a whole lot. The methods used by the threat actor are pretty much the same once they are in there actually executing on ransomware. Initial access is where we're seeing the change. So initial access, thanks to Worm GPT and Fraud GPT and things like that, and then the advent of projects like Evil Jinx, people can get around MFA now. Microsoft Authenticator, things like that, and really attack an environment at will. So we are, having to adapt and understand that there's not a lot we can do sometimes about initial access. We're doing our best to identify and monitor and really kind of increase how we are, inspecting that. But a lot of the initial access looks like the user just accessing their environment. One of the things that has also changed is dwell time. Ransomware threat actors are now spending less than a week before they're executing ransomware.
Wow.
And, we're seeing on average about 3 days. So that means that you don't have a lot of time to detect. You don't have a lot of time to respond. You have to have a plan in place to identify what's going on and then solve the problem immediately. So that is really kind of the adaptation we're having to make is, okay, given that identity is really what is at stake here, given that identity is how the threat actor is getting into the environment. And we've seen a lot with Okta in the past as well, so this is not a new theme. So now, given that is the problem, what do we do once the threat actor has access to the environment to impede their progress? And we've developed some AD hardening playbooks. So our IR team that is seeing all these, front page ransomware cases, we're using what we've learned to harden the environments. And of course, we're doing that after an incident for people, but we're also doing it pre-breach. So we're applying that to our clients and to people who approach us and are interested in us hardening their environment. So AD hardening, and we're combining that with frequent attacks and really addressing vulnerability management as a piece of an ongoing puzzle. It's not something you should scan once in a while and come up with a remediation plan for. It's something that should be happening every day. So we are doing continuous pen testing, continuous vulnerability monitoring and management, really to get the threat surface under control for an organization. There's always a way in. And I believe there's nothing you can do to stop a determined threat actor from getting into your environment. But given that, I can slow them down once they're in. So we're doing everything we can to harden environments, segment environments, put in all that work pre-breach so that when there is an incident, it's less impactful to the organization, and it is, it's easier to recover from. And, so it may take down human resources or sales instead of the entire organization. And by avoiding that, open AD environment where it's just flat and open and it's easy for someone just to pass the hash around the environment. By hardening AD, we're actually making a lot of that lateral movement hard to do. And so we're doing that, and then with monitoring, we can detect a lot of the attempts then. So we're able to solve the problem mid-attack now instead of, waiting for the fire to happen. But table stakes are always going to be MFA, immutable backups, and MDR. And when I say MDR, I mean not just deploying an EDR solution, but deploying an EDR solution with somebody managing it, a SOC or somebody in charge of it. Because without that, EDR can be chiming all kinds of alarms to you all day and nobody's actually responding to it.
Yeah.
So I think those three things are always going to be table stakes. And MFA has been table stakes for a long time now, but it's still a problem. Every organization still has MFA about half deployed. So it makes it easy for the threat actors. But by hardening those environments, we're able to impede the progress. So that's really the latest revolution. But how we start to think about incident response is we need a feedback loop. We need a constant feedback loop between our IR team and our MSSP and our MSP teams so that what we're seeing on the front lines becomes actionable for all of our clients, not just the one having the incident. And so that's something that whether you're a service provider like us or whether you're an enterprise, your IR team should have a fast feedback loop to every part of your organization. If they're noticing something that is causing a problem with an application that you're hosting as a SaaS company or whatever the nature of your organization is, they should be able to get that input into development, and development should solve that problem ASAP. So it should be a fast feedback loop, or else you're going to be fighting the same attacks over and over and over again.
Yeah, and actually, I'm glad you brought that up. Space that's near and dear to my heart. Active Directory, some of the challenges there, but the construct of eviction as part of that is maybe, nowadays folks should just go with the assumption that they're in an AD, Active Directory eviction state, where that's what they need to just assume that they need to do from the beginning. So, absolutely on hardening, but what's kind of interesting, and I think there's an evolution somewhat that will come, especially in this AD space, is where there's basically containers of Active Directory, and there's some vendors that help you in that space where you're in kind of a gold state, a state where it's an empty vessel that you rehydrate, and whether it be under attack or for eviction.
Yep.
And Cyber Resiliency Engineering Framework has some constructs and concepts that allow for you to kind of build out that plan, so to speak. But one thing that's kind of interesting, on the CREF Navigator, we've since adapted ourselves to try and address, questions from the community about, hey, how do I do, get threat groups, particular threat groups? How do I deal with that? Dumping of threat groups and the relationships back to attack and the candidate mitigations and mitigations within attack. And so we've added that as a pull down within the Cyber Resiliency or the CREF Navigator. And so that's something that folks have kind of come back to. And, some of the AD elements that are within there kind of, help guide you to some possible mitigations, candidate mitigations, or approaches that are, key somewhat to that next step. And a few of the other things that we've put in there that aren't necessarily related to the AD eviction point, but while I'm on it, CMMC, so 800, 171, 172, but CMMC 2 and 3 is now got a visualization in there, and that's very recent. And a few other elements where you're able to just import and export. You can import campaigns from Attack Navigator, or you can import your own JSON from Attack Navigator that you've chosen as your challenge and bring that in. But back to the AD eviction and AD hardening, I think that that will be a challenge, and hopefully Microsoft will also help us out a little bit in that space as things migrate and evolve and folks become less hybrid.
Absolutely. I think the kind of technologies that you were mentioning, like the non-persistence for AD, that's obviously a cyber resilience engineering framework concept, and that non-persistence of servers, of identity, of data. That's really where we're going to see ransomware go away. And I don't think we're anywhere near that in the industry. Like, we can't tell people to get rid of their servers. We can't tell people to get rid of their directory structure, AD. But that is going to be the solution. So the more you can evolve to being non-persistent there, that is the solution. And I love to hear about these things that you guys are adding to CREF Navigator. I think that, all these integrations, these additions of these things, even, as zero trust ideas and everything are overlapping and getting more involved, I think that it's just going to become a more and more useful tool for everyone. And I love how the visualizations actually apply and to that board level strategy. And Cyber Resiliency Engineering Framework can actually help guide a cyber strategy for an organization. It's not just a tactical tool for an IT guy to try to figure out the best way to get resilience. It is something that can help top-down strategy in IT and security in an organization.
Well, I'll tease that, CREF Navigators might have some zero trust things coming, God willing, in the very near future. Things are in the works, hopefully.
That's great. I'm looking forward to seeing that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, I'm kind of curious on your end. Is there any hope?
So current, no. So what we are seeing is improvement. So although ransomware attacks continue to increase, they're more and more frequent. The impact to the organization is becoming less, and so there's a reason for that. It's not that the attacks are weaker; it's that organizations are finally starting to get on board, and organizations are finally starting to be more resilient. And it may be that they've suffered now 3 major cyber attacks, and they're like, "Oh, what do we need to change now in order to improve?" But that's really the hope I'm seeing. It's not that ransomware is going away; it's that despite the increase of ransomware attacks, there's actually less cyber claims being put in for it, and there's less people paying ransom now. So despite the increased volume, companies are actually able to bounce back. So that means that they've implemented immutable storage solutions, immutable backups, things like that, so they can get back on their feet and recover. This isn't all of them. We're still doing a lot of response and recovery for organizations, but it's showing that there is an improvement. Of course, I believe the threat actors are just going to adapt and make something worse, and it's going to kind of set back the clock for everybody, and everybody's going to go back to being punished religiously by the threat actors. But for the moment, we're as just an industry, as a globe, we are responding better to ransomware than we have in the past. So there are less operationally destructive impacts to organizations. Yeah, it's unfortunate to get ransomware and have to do an investigation around it and a breach notification and all that stuff. But organizations are able to restore now more than they were before. So that's hopeful.
Okay.
And I think that's mainly being driven by their experience with ransomware and by cyber insurance. Cyber insurance is requiring more and more controls to be insured. And, government tends to be slow in implementing policy and controls. Insurance, next year, they're going to require more controls. So.
Well, it's kind of funny. I asked you, is there hope? And then, if you asked me that same question, I would say that actually what's kind of interesting is government's starting to move a little quicker in terms of standards bodies, in terms of engagement. Dr. Ron Ross, one of my favorite guys on the planet, he is a social media maven. And so he's really kind of been part of bringing in a number of standards that, and pushing them outwardly to the community to engage, both, at the government level and beyond. So, I see hope, at least in some of the standards moving faster, academia and others really jumping in and embracing the ever adapting changes of, whether it be the introduction of new frameworks or the introduction of ways to engage a defensive posture. It's not all just about knocking things over.
Right.
It's about building and building more securely and more resilient. And that every time somebody cracks open 800-160 Volume 2 in some way, Cyber Resiliency Engineering Framework under the covers, that makes me a happier person.
Yeah.
So I see that hope, and folks, even in engagement here at RSA for the frameworks, folks were telling me, where within a framework I wasn't as familiar with, where to find an element. And I was excited, and it was, something with Atlas that I didn't know. And so as a result, there's, folks using Defend in interesting and unique ways, things that, that is significant. And so it's at least giving me some hope that folks are getting it.
Absolutely. I think that evolution of these frameworks shows that we're getting attention now. And I think implementation is still going to be a challenge, because right now as a practitioner, I see a lot of different frameworks coming out for different things. CSA is putting out great material, CIS, MITRE. There's so much information out there that it's a little bit overload, and it would be nice if I had some kind of unified framework that would just kit bash them all together. But in the meantime, I'm just glad to see all this work coming to a head. And as a practitioner, I'm just wondering how I'm going to implement all of this great stuff.
Well, at least you have some baseline for frameworks you can go after. Understanding attack being one of them, understanding cyber resiliency, understanding defend, understanding the NIST special pubs that are associated, and then bringing yourself back to hopefully finding a way to communicate and get the budget, get the money, and get the change that's needed within, for the planet.
Shane, thank you so much for letting me speak with you, especially about ransomware. That's really my, my baby right now is incident response for ransomware. But I've loved hearing you speak about what's coming with the Cyber Resiliency Engineering Framework. Can you recap that before we close?
Yeah, sure. I mean, in general, we've got some zero trust elements that probably are coming in. We also have some possible elements where you'll be able to look at a particular approach or technique and see a visual representation of what that might look like, so that you can start to glue these Lego pieces together in a model and understand by interacting with that model where you start to lose resiliency capabilities, availability to a system, confidentiality to a system, maybe integrity to a system. So over a mission or business, you'll be able to model, at least in the possibly in the Navigator, that ability. But that's budget's willing.
Well, I'm looking forward to seeing those features come in, and I'm looking forward to continue using the tool. And I'm looking forward to seeing you again in RSA next year, and of course any B-sides or other cyber events in between.
Absolutely.
And to continue talking about this and to stir up more buzz.
Yeah, and I really look forward to how you in the trenches are fighting the good fight. For small and medium businesses, that's not necessarily where the big money is, but it is definitely needed, and nation needs it. So, thank you for helping out.
Thank you.
All right.